You wake up one morning and you're driven, clear-headed, ready. 3 days later, you can barely recognize who that person was. You don't feel lazy. You don't feel broken. You just feel different. Again. And somewhere underneath that, a quiet question is growing. Who actually am I? Most people assume identity is stable. That there's a fixed you underneath everything. Consistent, knowable, dependable. But if you've ever caught yourself being ambitious one week and indifferent the next, deeply social one day and almost allergic to people the next, or feeling a sense of purpose so real you could hold it, and then watching it dissolve overnight with no explanation, then you know that this idea of a fixed self doesn't match your actual experience. And that gap, between what identity is supposed to feel like and how it actually feels, that gap is quietly exhausting. You start making promises to yourself that a different version of you will break. You start projects that some future version of you will abandon. You watch yourself behave in ways that feel out of character, and you think, which one is the real me? This isn't instability. This isn't immaturity. This is something specific happening in your psychology, and once you understand it, it changes everything. Here's what psychology actually says about identity. The self is not a thing. It's a process. Psychologist Dan McAdams spent decades studying identity and concluded that who we are is closer to a narrative, a story we're constantly revising, than a fixed object we carry around. You are not a noun. You are a verb. And the person who feels different every week isn't losing themselves. They're simply more aware, perhaps painfully aware, of something that is true for every human being. That context shapes us, constantly. The version of you that shows up at work, with family, alone at midnight, these aren't masks. They are real responses to real environments, drawn from a deep and complex inner system. The problem isn't that you change. The problem is that no one told you that was allowed. So what's actually happening in the brain? There's a concept in personality psychology called state versus trait. A trait is a stable tendency, something like introversion or conscientiousness. A state is a temporary condition, the version of you that exists right now, shaped by sleep, stress, emotion, context. Your brain doesn't run on a single program. It runs on something closer to an ensemble. Neuroscientists call this neural context dependence. Different environmental and emotional inputs activate different neural circuits, which in turn produce different thoughts, motivations, and even values in the moment. Think of it this way. Imagine your mind is not one voice, but a room full of people. Each one has a perspective. Each one becomes louder or quieter depending on what's happening around you. When you're rested and safe, the part of you that thinks long-term gets the MIC. When you're overwhelmed or threatened, the part of you wired for immediate relief steps forward. Neither one is the real you. Both are real. That's the mental model. You are not one voice. You are a room. And the feeling of being a different person every week is the experience of different members of that room responding to a changing world. This is also why identity feels especially unstable in times of transition, high stress, or emotional overload. The room gets louder, harder to navigate. The brain's default mode network, which is responsible for self-referential thought, becomes hyperactive under uncertainty. You think about yourself more. You find less certainty. You feel less like you. Not because you are disappearing, but because the signal is harder to read through the noise. So how do you work with this instead of against it? Step 1. Stop trying to find the real you. Start finding your threads. Research on narrative identity shows that psychological coherence doesn't come from sameness. It comes from continuity. Not I'm always the same, but I can trace a line through who I've been. In practice, once a week, write one sentence about what mattered to you that week. Not what you did, what mattered. Over time, patterns emerge. Those patterns are closer to identity than any single mood state. Step 2. Name your states without judging them. When you notice a shift, instead of asking, why am I like this, try labeling, this is my withdrawn state. This is my driven state. This is called affect labeling, studied by neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman, and it reduces the emotional charge around a feeling by engaging the prefrontal cortex. Simply naming the state gives you distance from it. You observe it instead of becoming it. Real-life example. You cancel plans and feel guilty. Instead of I'm flaky, try, I'm in a low stimulation state right now. It's accurate, and it doesn't attack your identity. Step 3. Anchor to values, not moods. Moods shift. Values, when consciously chosen, are more stable. Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, shows that people who clarify their values and act in alignment with them, even when moods contradict it, experience far greater psychological coherence over time. Ask, regardless of how I feel today, what do I want to be toward? Not what I want to feel, what I want to move toward. That question creates a compass that works even when the signal is noisy. Step 4. Protect the transitions. The most disorienting moments often happen at context switches. Moving from work to home, from social to solitary, from high output to rest. These transitions are neurologically demanding. Your brain needs time to shift between networks. Build small rituals into transitions. A walk, a specific song, 5 minutes of nothing. This isn't self-care aesthetics, it's giving the prefrontal cortex time to update its model of who you are in this new context. Step 5. Let some versions of you exist without needing to resolve them. Psychologist Walt Whitman, not the poet, the metaphor, was right about one thing. Walt Whitman the poet wrote, I contain multitudes. The goal is not to flatten yourself into one consistent character. The goal is to hold your different versions with enough awareness that they don't feel like separate strangers, but like a family you're slowly learning to understand. Here's the model to carry with you. You are not a fixed point. You are a pattern across time. Identity isn't what stays the same. It's what you can trace. The thread that runs through all of it, even when the colors change. The shifting isn't the problem. The judgment you add to the shifting is where the suffering comes from. The brain adapts. It responds. It changes register depending on what life asks of it. That is not weakness. That is a mind that is alive to its environment. You are not losing yourself every time you change. You are just a more complex system than anyone told you to expect. The person who was driven on Monday and quiet by Friday, that's not inconsistency. That's the full range of a human being doing their best in a world that rarely stays still. You don't need to become more consistent. You need to become more familiar with all of who you already are. And maybe the most honest thing you can do is stop asking which version is real. And start getting curious about what each version is trying to tell you.